We're actually starting, often we start on the back, but I'm mixing it up a little bit. So if it is at all comfortable to sit back on your heels for a moment. If not, then that's where the blocks can be handy. So stacking up some blocks between your legs so that you give your knees and your ankles a little bit more space and not so much weight. So see if that works. And we'll just settle here for a moment. So maybe a wee bit of a wiggle. What I wanted to feel into, you see my hands coming onto my ribs and onto my hip bones. So I spread my fingers out. What will play a little bit, one of the aspects that will play a little bit today is this relationship between your ribs and your pelvis. So you can notice that when you arch your back and when your tailbone lifts, there's more space here in the front. The ribs float upward. And then when you draw your tailbone down, there's less space between your hip bones and your rib cage. So there's like this, the rib basket kind of curves inward. So it is another way to, often I talk about like your focus being on the lower back when we do the arch and flattening. But what if you do the arch and flattening and feeling the relationship between your rib cage and your pelvis? So go a few more times. Any rhythm is okay, just sensing that these two parts of the body are moving in relationship to each other. And then can you find this position where, as if your rib cage would be a lampshade, that the lampshade is shining its light or is positioned directly above your pelvis. So you're neither too flat or rounded, neither are you too arched in the lower back. But rather than feeling the lower back area, can you orient yourself with, okay, my rib cage is positioned directly over my pelvis. And it doesn't have to be precise. We'll keep playing with that. And then once you're there, you could use your hands more to kind of feel this midriff of the body. So with a wee bit of a touch, bringing your awareness here, the bottom of the rib cage is where your diaphragm attaches. And then if at all comfortable, have your hands be a little bit kind of holding onto the sides of the ribs. Sometimes you even need to squeeze the hands in a little bit to facilitate breath moving sideways. We are so used to having the breath go forward, big breath forward. I'm asking you to feel the movement in your rib cage, in the sides of the rib cage as you breathe in. There's a wee bit of like a handle lifting and lowering. It's not a big movement. So that we are more coming into what's called the 360-degree breath. So our rib cage really is in this lower section of it, in the midriff of the body, is doing a little bit of a movement forward, sideways, and backwards on the inhale. So a couple of more breaths like that. Just the hands are there. If the shoulders get tired, you can let the hands go. And I'm not necessarily making my breath bigger. My breath is still a natural, normal breath. And this is the way we ideally want to breathe, in a sense that there's this rib cage movement, that the diaphragm is moving and the rib cage is moving in this 360-degree fashion. Go with one more breath like this. And then from time to time, I'll bring your attention back to that when we practice, but you could let your hands go, but now you've touched that area, so there might be a little bit more awareness, a little bit more of mind-body connection. Your brain has a better map of this area when we bring the touch in. And then we're going to give our knees and ankles a little bit of a break, and we're going to come over onto all fours. If you had your blocks there, you could just step them aside. And let's do our focusing come over onto our wrists. So I have my palms wide, and I do a wee bit of a circling with my Shoulders going to the right, going forward over the wrist to the left and back of the wrists. And just feel the weight distribution. So the weight going to the pinky side, forward, and to the thumb side and towards the wrist. And again, move slowly enough so that you can pay attention. Create a nice big palm print onto your mat, and then circle the opposite way. Circle the opposite way. And then we're going to keep the shoulders more or less on top of the wrists, and we bring our attention higher up into the shoulders. We shrug the shoulder blades towards each other. My elbows stay straight, so your chest drops down towards the ground. And then you push the palms down and broaden the upper back, so the shoulder blades are going to move away from each other. See if you can feel this gliding action. And keep your head leveled so your head is not dropping. So it's like a mini cat and cow, but I'm focusing on this upper section and I'm focusing on my shoulder blades. Now see if you can find the glide. Next time kind of staying somewhere in the middle, not dropping, not arching. And can you find the glide where the shoulder blades move downward towards your hips and then upward so the neck gets shorter? Might be a bit tricky in this position, but play with that. Nothing needs to be perfect. And then let us see if we can start to find a circle from here. So the shoulder blades move up, away, down. See if you, how would your body organize itself? And can the circling change? And if there's a little kind of crosswire shaky position, then that's my intentional thing that I often bring in. Let us feel a wee bit weird, or give our body and mind a wee bit of time to find the solution. Don't get frustrated is what I'm saying, basically. Cool. And then let your bum drift back towards the heels and open your knees a wee bit so that you have a bit of space. Walk the hands back towards your knees and sit back on your heels and do a couple of rounds of cat and cow from here. So feel your tailbone lifting, feel your tailbone curling. So you feel now several places where we can feel this movement. So we just did shoulder blades, so come and feel this movement from the shoulder blade perspective. Feel this movement from the shoulder blade perspective. And then feel this movement from that rib cage pelvic position perspective that we did in the beginning. So how are the pelvis and rib cage moving relative to each other? Good, and then we'll bring the same movement, but we are going to bring the knees a little bit closer, and you're going to come onto your forearms. So the cat and cow movement from the forearms. And you're going to let the whole spine move. Inhaling, exhaling. Go a couple of more rounds. Good. And then next time, when your chest is lifted, pause, your sit bones are lifted, tailbone is lifted, tuck your toes under, and ever so slightly begin to press your forearms down, begin to lift your knees up, and just experiment, moving your shoulders backward. Knees don't have to go straight at all, to start to feel weight bearing in your shoulders. See if you can let your head drop. Maybe tiny bit of shoulder blade movement from here. Do you have access of shoulders shrugging a little bit? And then drop your knees down onto the ground. Round your back from here, and then let the bum move back towards your heels. Keep the forearms grounded if you can, maybe feeling a wee bit of a stretch in the shoulders. Take a breath in. And then let that be like a little flow. So come to your forearms, so lift the hips, they come on top of the knees. Lift your chest, Lift your sit bones, tuck your toes, begin to press your forearms down to lift yourself into what we sometimes call a dolphin pose. So moving the shoulders back towards your thighs, making sure the neck is long, maybe experimenting a little bit of a movement possibility in the shoulder blades here in this weight-bearing position. And then slowly, in your own time, when you feel ready, let the knees slowly come back down onto the ground. Have an arched back version here, so let the shoulder blades move away from each other, and then drift your bum back towards the heels while keeping the arms reached forward, maybe sensing a stretch through the shoulders, armpits, rib cage. And just one more like this, like a mini flow from here. Mini vinyasa, if you will. Perfect. And then next, when you're in the child's pose, we're going to float back to all fours. And one more little detail thing, but I'm going to now draw our attention down into the hips. So I'm going to have my knees hip distance apart. And then what I'll do is I'll move the feet slightly outward. So rather than feet right behind your knees, have your feet move outward. And you can play whether you have the feet flat or whether you have the toes tucked. What has happened is your thigh bone has rotated internally. And find now this position where your rib cage is shining its light straight into your pelvis, meaning that I don't change the relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis as I start to move my hips back. Only move to a point where you feel resistance and there should be no pinching. If there's pinching, you're going to do less. So your thighs are internally rotated while you're moving your pelvis back. Take a breath, slowly come back forward. Now we're going to go back with and round it back. So I'm going to curl the tailbone a bit and then experiment moving my hips back. So this is a quite unusual hip stretch. It can help create movement, space in the hips and in the lower back area. I'm going to move slowly back, and then I'm going to do my third variation where I'm going to lift my tailbone. So the rib cage has dropped a bit down towards the ground, and from that arched back version, I'm going to send my hips back. And then I invite you to slowly see if your attention can stay. Do all three at your own time. See if you can find the spine position, or other way to say it is that rib cage to pelvis position, and feeling your hips and moving slowly. Remember, no pinching. So I'm only going to a point where my body allows me to comfortably go. Excellent. Good. And then if you've done the three, you could bring your feet back. Let's take a downward facing dog when you're ready. So tucking the toes, and this time the palms rather than your forearms are going to press down as you lift up. And we use this shape to not to perfect the actual form, but again to let the body wiggle a little bit. Move your shoulder blades. What are some possibilities for shoulder blade gliding from this position? And then how does your spine or hips or any other part of the body kind of wants to create more freedom, release some tension, give it a couple of more breaths. And then one more time, I'm going to have you sit back on your heels, so bring those blocks in if you need to. We'll do one shoulder movement, one more shoulder movement from here. And throughout the whole movement now, I want this relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis not to change. So as I move shoulders, I'm not going to be doing this type of an action. So my lampshade of a rib cage is shining straight down to the pelvis. You're going to take your arms out, palms are facing forward. You're going to take your hands behind the head, but now I'm going to move my arms and elbows as far back as I can without pushing my head forward and without doing anything funky with my ribs. So I'm going to find the movement, the shoulder blade movement, activation around the shoulder blade of the arm moving backward. From here, I'm going to open the arms out wide again. Without moving my ribs, I'm going to turn the palms backward, back in the space behind me, internal rotation in the arms. I'm going to bend the elbows to take the hands onto my lower back, but again, they're going to hover. So rather than touching, they're going to hover above the lower back, however much you can. And again, I'm not doing anything with this part of the body. And then let's try to slowly move between this upper movement behind the head. And at one point I feel that my core needs to switch on a little bit so that I don't let my midsection want to come and help with the movement. I want to isolate this movement into my shoulders, and it's a strengthening and also mobility, so range of motion, movement in your shoulders plus creating strength. Go one more. We'll flow in a bit, but right now we're just focusing on one part of the body in detail. I want to do one more. How about you? If you're tired, take a little rest. Good. And then next time when your arms are starting to move down, just lower them and just kind of feel the shoulder area. Maybe it wants a wee bit of a shake. Take a breath. Excellent. Let's use the downward facing dog as a wee bit of a transition. Maybe again you can feel your shoulders here in the down dog. And then let's walk our feet forward in whatever way you want. Small steps. One big step, jump, let yourself land at the front of the mat. Have a little moment here of feel the dangling. So letting your knees soften, letting your spine release, head heavy. Possibly a breath out through the mouth. Meet the back body by straightening the knees just to a point where you start to feel a stretch at the back of the legs, and then soften the knees again. Press the four corners of each foot down as you do this, so there's a wee bit of tone coming into the legs. I'll do that one more time. Good, and then we are getting ready to roll up to standing, so knees can stay really bent. I like to come with a really rounded back, keeping the head tangling and the arms tangling. Unraveling. Up in standing, having again a little moving moment, just noticing how it feels to be standing upright, feeling into your feet. And we'll do a couple of times moving into a chair pose, now with that awareness of when I start to let your feet be wider, when I start to sit into my chair. Even though my chest can come forward, that's fine, but my relationship between my rib cage and my pelvis doesn't change. So I don't do tail tucking, I don't do tail lifting, I'll keep it as is. So we'll go a few times and go slowly enough, and maybe this indication of the hands feeling this distance between your lower ribs and your hip bones can be helpful. And move slowly in a sense that you feel the soles of the feet pressing down. Your knees are not collapsing inward or outward, so the legs are strong. And as you sit down, can you feel your sit bones widening, so your pelvic floor widens? And then the sit bones are gathering. We'll do one more with just kind of getting this chair pose thing happening. All right, and then I'm going to take my hands onto my lower back next time when I'm standing, and I'm going to hover them just like we did before when we were sitting on our heels. So we'll put those two movements together, and again, I keep this relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis. When I start to sit into my chair, I'm going to slowly open the arms and rotate them up and forward. And then when I rise, I rotate them, but they're hovering away from the lower back without the ribs flaring. So go a few times, again at your own pace, and see if your awareness can be feeling this relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis. I'll go one more. Good, and then next time when you sit into your chair, pause for a moment. Let there be a little bit of a bounce, and then let yourself start to curl forward fold. Take your right leg towards the back of the mat. Take your right knee down onto the ground. Take your left hand and just kind of support the left forearm on your left thigh. Keeping again your rib cage, everything else steady, and do some circles with the right arm going up. As it starts to go up, at one point it needs to rotate. The palm needs to rotate away. Go slowly enough so you can feel that everything else stays steady. Go maybe just 2 circles one way and then switch. Feel when you need to rotate the arm. Circle the opposite way as well. Go slower than you think. Good, and then next time is down. Take the hand down onto the ground. Tuck the back toes under. Lift the back knee up, and then open the back foot so it comes onto the ground. Warrior 2 legs. Press down through both feet and come up to standing. Let us do a few times of bending into that front leg with awareness, just into more our regular warrior position, and then I'll change the front foot position, but just give your hip this stimulation. This is the thigh externally rotated. That's nice. But then what if you point the toes forward? So both set of toes are pointing in the same direction. Now come back to sense the relationship between your rib cage and your pelvis. As you bend into that knee, lean a little bit forward, but keep the relationship. And then rising up. Press down through the feet. So it's like you're doing half a chair pose, and the other leg is doing a bit of a pressing down and a stretch for the inner thigh. Cool. We go one more time. Good, and then we'll hold like we sometimes do, so bringing some strength work in. So I feel into this relationship, I feel my relationship to the ground. And then to add a wee bit of a upper body movement, I'm going to wave my arms kind of up above. Doesn't have to be precise, but you'll notice that there's a little bit more I'm now asking of my body. I'm asking more from that hip. I need to hold my arms up. If it starts to get tiring, like you check for that point when to release. I'm going to give it another breath in, another breath out, and then I'll rise back. Whew. I'll point the toes. I'll do a little movement of squaring that back hip forward, so we're in a lunge position, and then drawing the arms up from here, having a little bounce, and then draw the hands, take them onto your lower back, possibly soften that back knee so you can find more, again, that pelvis, rib cage shining into your pelvis position. Move the hands away from the lower back. Start to draw them out to the side, behind the head, just like we did. I'll meet you when the hands are on your lower back, or kind of hovering. Maybe rest them onto your lower back for a moment, and either repeat the same or change your position to gravity by leaning forward, keeping the relationship rib cage pelvis, and doing the same arm movement from here. Arms hover. I'll meet you again when your hands are against the lower back, so that we can slide them down and step back to downward facing dog. Take a little moment. Breath in, breath out. Let yourself either be on all fours or in plank pose. And either on all fours or in plank pose, do one time where you let the shoulder blades come towards each other and broaden, and then slowly lower down onto the ground. Make a little pillow out of your hands under your forehead. Take a moment to give the body weight down into the ground. Empty your breath. Empty your breath. And then let us today just come into a Sphinx pose from here, so taking the forearms down onto the ground, and then feeling into this shape from the shoulder blade position for a moment, so you could sink and rise a couple of times. You could move the shoulder blades towards each other and away from each other. And then can you find a position to hold for a couple of moments, so the shoulder blades settle in a way that the neck feels spacious, the chest feels spacious, but also the back body feels spacious, so it's not everything kind of contracting in the back. There's also space in the back. Take a breath into the shape. Beautiful. Exhale, lower. Find yourself back to all fours. Possibly do downward facing dog. Spend a little moment in downward facing dog. If there's any other flow that you want to bring in, you could bring in. We will meet at the top of the mat after about 3 or 4 breaths. Top of the mat, find a forward fold that feels interesting to you. So knees soft, or a little bounce through the knees. And then curling up, taking your time. Let's take a few rounds of the chair pose flow. So if you want to use the hand, it's called swimmers, hovers. So you could use that, hands on the lower back, slightly away, feeling that rib cage position. As you begin to sit, the arms are going to do their rotational movement up. You can do just 2 or 3 depending on your pace. Feeling that rotation in the shoulder. And the next time when you sit in your chair, possibly have a little bounce, a little bit of a up and down like a small movement. Connect your roots down, and then from that bounce, can there be a little bit of lightness that comes in? Let yourself fold. Send your left leg to the back. Take the back knee down. Use your right thigh to lean onto it with your left arm. With your right arm. So the left arm can do about 2 rotations one way, slowly. And I almost use my right hand to feel my rib cage so that I'm not wiggling from here, so the arm can find what is the pure rotation that is available in my left shoulder. Make sure to do the opposite way as well. So you don't turn your chest away from the ground in order to have the illusion that there's more movement possible in that shoulder. Next time when the hand comes down, you can take it down to the ground, so we can lift the back knee, open the back hip so the foot comes to the ground. Press down to rise, find your warrior 2 shape. Do a few hip movements, warrior 2 hip movements from here, just to feel this. Knee softening, knee bending. I press my front foot down, so there's activation in that thigh. Well, what would change for the hip if I turn the toes forward? It's a different movement. I'm now want to concentrate once more into this relationship that my spine keeps its curves, is one way to think of it. Another way to think of it is what I've been saying about a million times in this class, is that rib cage pelvis position. And then we build a little bit of static strength rather than through movement. I'm going to find my hold here. Again, I'm going to for a moment feel this area, pressing the foot down. If you wish, adding that upper body movement. You can be creative with this. It's nothing precise. It's something that felt interesting. And I breathe into the shape. I let a little bit of tension build. And I see my own reactions within it. I play with the heat that's building. And then always wise discernment if you need to change, if you need to come out. You are in charge completely. I'll give it another breath. Woo. Circling back out. Turning the right toes. Finding that little pivot into a lunge, making sure the distance is comfortable. And by comfortable, I mean stable. I soften the back knee a bit so I have more access again to this area in the body. I take the hands onto the lower back. I find one more swimmer's hover movement. Last one, I promise. When I meet you on the lower back, you could stay with the same relationship to gravity, or you could experiment what changes if I lean forward. I again check my midriff. I keep it steady. I keep the front foot pressing down. Excellent. Lower the hands. And this time, instead of stepping back, walk the hands halfway towards your back leg. So you're going to come into a wide-legged forward fold. Have a little moment to feel into the backs of the legs from here. Soften the knees. Wiggle your ribs. And then walk your hands so they are under your shoulders. And if you have blocks, hands could be on blocks, because I'm not going to focus on the backs of the legs. I'm going to do one last focusing onto the shoulder blades. I'm going to turn the fingers backward. So you need to be with your palms down on something. So either knees are super soft or hands are elevated higher on something. And I'm going to try to find my shoulder blade movement from here. So I'm going to try to do the rounding and the shoulders blades towards each other. And remember, awkward is good. Good for the neuroplasticity, like us finding new ways. Can I find the forward up towards the ears and then down towards the hips movement from here? And then maybe even, this one is hard, maybe even shoulder blade circles. One way, weird, and the other way. Cool, and then at one point let yourself hang forward, possibly holding on to the opposite elbows and just letting your head tangle. Maybe your upper body becomes like a rag doll dangling down. A couple of breaths in the forward fold like this. Nice slow inhale. Empty out on your exhale, exhale. And then release the hands. We use the squat as a transition, so toe heel your feet so that you can start to sit your hips between your heels. Just for a moment, if squat is not comfortable, maybe that block that you have could be under your seat or something under your heels. I'll feel my rib cage and pelvis position here. Feel the breath in that midriff of the body. That 360 degrees. One more. And then as you start to sit down, let's pause. Find a seat that is comfortable. So I'll do a ending where we'll sit for a couple of minutes and then we'll lie down for like a final twist. So I'll sneak my meditation in the middle and know that it is just a couple of minutes. And if you want to, you could stay seated while I guide others down to the ground. So you could use your blocks for the seat. You could be sitting cross-legged if that works for your body. You could be sitting like I'm sitting, knees pointing forward, feet back. You could be sitting on a chair. And have a little moment in your seat of feeling that relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis. So again, we could look at a movement from many different perspectives, and then can you again find that place? So we could think of it as the neutral spine or being slightly forward on the sit bones, but also another way to describe it is where your rib cage is directly on top of your pelvis. And then when you found that, draw really soft circles with your shoulder blades. One way and the other. And then let them settle down along the back body so that again it feels that there's space in the front and in your chest. But it's not as if you like forcefully squeezing them together and creating this artificial puffiness through the front. Feel the head floating on top of your spine. Spend a moment having relationship with your sacrum and your pelvis and your hips as they anchor downward, this tethering downward towards the ground. And then from that downward movement, can you sense your spine a little bit more effortlessly floating upward? And then spend a moment to feel your breath in that midriff of the body where we started. If you need to, you could again use your hands to feel that area, or simply maybe attention is enough. Without making your breath bigger, can you sense the breath moving the sides of the ribs, the back, and the front evenly? And then as the physical aspects of you are finding a certain alignment, certain attunement, notice how does stillness feel like this morning? And know that it could be anywhere on the spectrum, like I hate it to I love it, anywhere on that continuum, and it's totally okay. And then similarly, as you've been noticing these physical aspects, can you give similar, like open, receptive attention to anything else that's moving through your awareness? Whether it's your thoughts, whether it's some emotional content that's in the foreground. Can we be here for a moment, just allowing or meeting or hosting whatever is present? Physical shape becoming this container that creates a foundation of stability. So we can meet ourselves with some steadiness and ease. And then those of you who want to have a moment lying down, then you could make your way there. And if you feel once you lie down that your body wants a twist, you could add a twist in this space. And if you've landed somewhere where you feel like you could stay seated for a wee bit longer, whether it is you holding something that is challenging or you holding something that feels beautiful and good, you could stay as you are. I'll hold space for a couple of more minutes. And if you have space, you could stay seated for a bit longer. If you are lying down for a bit longer. And if you know that this 45 minutes was what you had for your practice, and make a slow transition. If you're lying down, if you're seated, you could find little micro movements. Maybe there's a gesture that you want to bring in here, a hand gesture or an intention that you want to let ripple out into your day. We seal this session, as I say, thank you so much for